Welcome back, everybody. This is Rodrigo Afanador with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. Thank you once again for joining us today. We're really excited to bring another show to you all. As a reminder, though, all of our episodes here at Asheville Real Estate News are brought to you all by American IRA LLC, your local IRA custodian here for Western North Carolina. So today we are going to be diving into a topic we haven't explored very much, and that topic is actually Hendersonville. So a lot of the guests and topics and conversations we've had on this show have focused around things that are very specific to the Asheville area. And today, very excited to bring on Lew Holloway, who's I'm going to try to get this right, the economic director of Downtown Hendersonville, or something close to that. And we're going to talk Hendersonville and all of the changing aspects of what's happening down there. So, Lew, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I always ask, how you got to the area, because it seems like there's not a lot of people who are in the Asheville, and Hendersonville area that are as local. It's like everybody got here and stayed.
Yeah, it's a great question. I do a lot of public presentations, and one of my favorite ways to lead into that down in Hendersonville is with a very similar question. So I kind of go through raise your hand if your grandparents were born here, raise your hand if your parents were, raise your hand if you were. And it's really interesting, Henderson County, and I'm not sure how this stat reflects in Buncombe, but I'd imagine that it's similar, has seen a 40-year upward trend in population growth. So just uninterrupted for 40 years. They've been outpacing North Carolina state growth rates. Of course, the state of North Carolina, as a general rule, has been outpacing the nation. So where you're from, and whether or not you are, born in that community is certainly a question that's a fun one to ask and kind of give some context. And I was not born in Henderson County or in Western North Carolina, for that matter. I was born in West Virginia and went to college in Virginia. Always ask people down here not to hold that against me. But went to Washington and Lee, which is a small liberal arts college, for undergraduate school, and then got a master's degree in landscape architecture at Virginia Tech. And
Gotcha.
So moved to Asheville originally in 2008 and worked with the State Department of Commerce as an urban designer in their Main Street program for about 4 years before moving to Hendersonville to take the job and the opportunity with the downtown program there. So grew up in the mountains, spent a lot of my time in the mountains, and my wife and I visited Asheville a couple of times, and we were living outside of Richmond at the time in 2007, and I was working at a landscape architecture firm in Charlottesville, and we were trying to figure out where to land and what to do, and Asheville ended up being the one that worked out. And that's probably, in terms of finding the place, a story that you've heard more than once on this show.
Absolutely. I mean, it's basically very similar to like my story. Most people's is you come and you're like, wow, this place is really special. How do I get myself here? And my excuse was school, and then like that didn't work out. But I was like, well, I'm not leaving, even though I'm not doing school anymore. I'm sticking this thing out and seeing how we can make it happen. So it's a sticky place for sure. Curious, West Virginia is also super beautiful. Appalachia, right? So a lot of similarities, or what's your experience coming from there to here? Sure. Same mountains, obviously different area though.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it generates a couple good jokes, right? And the one I like to tell, when I come down here, people are like, well, we live in a rural area. It's, it's the country. We're in the mountains. And I'm like, well, yeah, sort of.
Define rural.
Yeah, exactly. So, the county I grew up in, Calhoun County, it's in sort of the Ohio River region of West Virginia. It's kind of not northern, but sort of central West Virginia on the western side of the state. And it's about 2/3 the size of either Buncombe or Henderson County, but the total population is 7,500 people. So that my graduating high school class was 212, and that was the whole county. So, it's similar in the sense that the natural beauty is very, very appealing. It's a lot different in the sense that the economic opportunities that exist in Western North Carolina and the population and the density and the growth are all things that are non-existent there.
Basically,
basically,
it's probably not even comparable. Is it?
No, it's really not. There's a lot of people who I grew up with there in Calhoun who have ended up moving down to North Carolina. Not all of them in Western North Carolina, but or other southern states, right. that they've been drawn to, and that's always been a challenge for West Virginia in general. The brain drain, people in Appalachia and in the Appalachian regional area,
right.
Talk a lot about that.
As far as like if people get the opportunity to move, they typically do.
Yeah, well, and people who go to college,
right.
Get a 4-year degree, who could bring a lot to their communities.
They're not coming back.
They're not coming back. There aren't opportunities for them to come back and to sort of engage.
Right.
And I always wanted to be in the mountains. Always wanted to be someplace that I could give back in some way. But also wanted to be in a vibrant community where my kids and my wife and I could enjoy life.
Absolutely.
Right? And
quality of life's important, right?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people in this area are making living decisions based on that. So, and it's certainly something that drew us here. But it's funny to think about that, and that's another joke I make. If you're looking for a quiet piece of land and you can't find it around here, I've got some great property for you in West Virginia. That I'm happy to share with you. So.
Sure, the prices are a little bit more exciting.
Yeah,
at least
and I
on
guarantee
paper,
you
right?
there'll be no road construction projects anytime in the next 50 years. So, So anyhow, it's. But it gave me a lot of context, gives me a perspective that I think helps me work in Henderson County and in Western North Carolina in general.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would imagine so. A lot of different questions we could go down that, but first, do you mind just kind of talking about how you got into the role that you're in today? Make sure I got your title right, and maybe just the description of like kind of what you do and what your focus is on like a day-to-day or year-to-year basis. Sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. My title, you got all 4 words right. Just the order was a little jumbled, but
we're almost there then.
Yeah, exactly. So the formal title is Downtown Economic Development Director, and I do work for the city of Hendersonville. I'm an employee of the city. I mentioned a little bit earlier, my master's degree is in landscape architecture and urban design. And my first job out of grad school was with a design firm doing primarily, commercial and residential design, stormwater design, that sort of thing. And that was in Charlottesville. And I enjoyed that. We also had a number of projects kind of in the, mountain community home building realm. So, this is 2006, 2007, running up to 2008. There were a lot of those same kinds of projects obviously going on in Western North Carolina too. And I enjoyed those, but I also was very familiar with the challenges that a lot of these mountain communities were facing apart from, whether or not a 200 home subdivision was going in. And so had started to look for other ways to use the skill set and came across the Main Street program. The Main Street program is economic development based in historic preservation. So
is that in general speaking, or is this like a specific Main Street program for Hendersonville?
Yeah, so it's in general and specific to Hendersonville. So the in general part is that the National Trust for Historic Preservation started the Main Street Economic Development Program back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was basically in response to their recognition that they were losing historic urban fabric all around the country because of significantly changing retail trends. So you had big boxes, Belk's,
Going in.
JCPenney's.
Yeah.
They were leaving downtown and they were going to malls.
Mm-hmm.
And so downtowns were really struggling with, well, what do we do with all these big old buildings? And so the Main Street program got started and was basically all about, it was driven by the desire to preserve these historic downtowns, but it sort of took a multi-pronged approach to, what do we need to be doing to draw people back into these districts? And so,
is this
ahead,
something that
in.
like a city applies for then?
So in North Carolina,
like Hendersonville had to be like, hey,
Yep.
our downtown fits this profile. Can we get whatever this program gives, money, support, whatever?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So North Carolina was one of the first states in the nation to develop a state-level program.
Gotcha.
And partnered with the National Trust early on.
Mm-hmm.
Hendersonville actually joined the state program in like 84, 85. So
It's been a minute.
Yeah, they've been at it for a while. So that really kind of going from the private sector
Mm-hmm.
where I was working on projects, driven by development
Right.
and the market, and moving to a state position with commerce where I had the opportunity to, basically I was going all over Western North Carolina and visiting smaller towns and doing basic economic development
Mm-hmm.
with, here are the pieces of what make a downtown work.
Right.
And my particular strength obviously was in urban design. So we were, talking about streetscapes in a lot of places. But I went to communities as disparate as West Jefferson up in Ashe County and Baden down in Stanley County, and just about everything in between.
You've seen a lot of the corners of the western part of the state then, haven't you?
It was a great introduction because not being from North Carolina,
You got to really see it.
yeah, it really did, and get a sense of how different parts of the state had developed. I'm still very unfamiliar with the eastern part of the state. So basically, we got about as far as Burlington, straight south.
Everything west.
Yeah, so I've been to Liberty and Troy, and and we would work with the communities for 2 years. So for 2 years, I'd be traveling monthly to these communities, and that was a great introduction. It was a great introduction to what the Main Street program was about. And then Hendersonville in 2011 had a staff change. They decided to move the program in-house, make it a city staff person. And, stars aligned. I pursued that opportunity and have been with them since that time. I started in about September of 2011.
Okay, so that's
It's almost
what,
8 years.
Okay,
Yeah, it's been almost 8 years that I've been working down
Wow.
there. So, yeah.
So did you move to Hendersonville with the change then?
We did. Yeah, we did.
So you're one of the early adopters of moving to
Yeah.
Hendersonville.
Yeah.
I had one of my really good friends. He moved down there in 2000, might have been 12, might have been
Okay.
13, and he was like, "It's great. Like it's like the house we got, the land, like it's like not even comparable to looking anywhere else." So
Yeah.
I know he's been a huge fan of that.
Well, that's
decision.
good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it. He's certainly part of a trend. I know when we look at our census data comes out each year, and they do county to county migrations. It's somewhere north of 50% of our county to county migration is Buncombe County moving to Henderson County, and we've certainly seen that. I know when my wife and I moved there in 11, we were a little nervous. We were like, are there going to be other young people? Certainly the county at that time didn't have the reputation for, lots of young families or anything like that. It was a sort of retirement destination. And that's still very much a part of what the community is. But, since moving down there, it's been interesting to see that dynamic shift and, the number of young families that are moving in at any given time is significant. We actually recently data, and I'm going to get the dates wrong. If somebody wants me to pin it down exactly, I can. But it's
we
basically
are not asking that.
Yeah.
Give us the range.
It's basically like the past 3 to 4 years, 60% of the in-migration into Henderson County has been Gen X or millennials.
Wow.
There's still a big 35% that's baby boomers. But, if you had asked somebody 10 years ago if they predicted that, they would have told you
no
were
way.
nuts.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not a chance. So I think it's good for everybody in the community that diversity in age group is happening, and it's certainly contributing to the character of the community. So
yeah, absolutely. Obviously here, well, maybe not obviously, but here in Asheville, there's a really big tension. And I'm curious to know if you all are experiencing the same tension there, where it's Asheville's so special because of what it is and what it's been, and all of these people coming into Asheville are ruining the fabric of what makes Asheville special. And so there's this dynamic, like, do you welcome, support outside people, outside money, outside development, or do you try to push growth off as much as possible to conserve what's already a good thing? How's that conversation going in Hendersonville at the city level? And what are you all hearing from, everybody who lives in the city and the area? What's the approach to that, or what's the temperature?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think these communities in Western North Carolina that are seeing population growth and just their communities changing, right? You're watching
quickly.
Changing pretty quickly. Yeah, and I'll answer this question and say yes, that does exist, but our situation's obviously still very different. I mean, I don't know how many hotels you all have had built in the past 2 or 3 years.
Too many or not enough, depending who you ask.
Right. But it's been a lot. We're trying to get a downtown hotel, and we can touch on that a little bit later, because we think it would strengthen our downtown community. Answering that question too, I think, comes in different parts. There's tension in our community about what's the traffic impact, and how are we dealing with that, and how are we keeping up with our infrastructure investments, and can you do that? And if you're trying to accomplish that today, you better be thinking about what it looks like in 20 years, because that's what you're trying to catch up with. So
that's a little bit of an impossibility, right?
Yeah.
Because going back, a couple minutes in our conversation, I was like, well, if you'd have predicted this 10 years ago, everybody would have been like, you're crazy.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And, it's also interesting, to throw a real wild card in there, right? The way we move around changes and has changed. In the past, it's changed relatively slowly. In the last 150 years, it's changed pretty rapidly. So, we domesticated horses 5,000-6,000 years ago, and we learned how to sail 6,000 years ago, and then we figured
nothing changed for 200 years, or until the last 100 years or so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, up until 250 years ago, that was how we all got around, and then we had trains, and we were cool with trains for about 50 or 60 years, and then we figured out cars. And what does the autonomous vehicle do to development in downtowns? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? I mean, you certainly hear arguments for both. So that tension does exist, I think, and that, anytime you have change and you have rapid change, there's going to be different responses to that, right? And there's also people that benefit and people that don't, and trying to figure out, exactly, trying to figure out how you balance that. One of the things when I'm thinking through some of those challenges as they relate to downtown, that I do think about, and that I will say to people is, better to have those than the opposite, because the community.
And those challenges being what, like people wanting to move here and the chaos that creates, versus not having people and then infrastructure crumbling because there's nothing to support it or
tax
whatever.
Base being reduced, depleted, people moving out, investment leaving the communities.
I don't think boarded up downtowns are really anything anybody's wanting to go back to.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I think there's a consensus. We all want to avoid that.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say, that at the core of what historic preservation-based economic development is repurposing old buildings and figuring out the new uses that will make them vibrant and maintain that character, and I think people think, well, it's just a building, but it's also the building that maybe Jimmy's grandmother worked in, and so there's a cultural connection there too that if you just get rid of that building and you put something new up, it's not the same thing. And
real estate carries a lot of emotion, right?
Right.
Like I think that's sometimes something that's really forgotten. I know it's something that really surprised me when I got into it. I was like, man, you really care about your house. And like I grew up in Colombia, South America. Home ownership there is not the same as it is here, where, it's this, like, the dream is to own a house. And you have so much autonomy there. It's like you grew up in an apartment. I mean, I grew up, we'd be in the shower and you could hear somebody else's shower running in the same, like there was not a lot of like home privacy. You did not feel like it was your house. It was just like a house in the middle of other ones, right? We shared the wall with everybody. But here it's like, it's a house, a lot of people multi-generational. So it is something else like that adds a dynamic that it's crazy. Emotions are strong.
Yeah.
And they're not always grounded in anything other than like how you feel, which is a very hard dynamic. On that note, though, when you're the director of economic development, right?
Right.
The right word order this time.
Yeah.
What is your charter? Like, what is your responsibility in that? Are you trying to grow the economy or the development in downtown, or are you just trying to like keep it healthy? Like, how would you say is your job description? Like, you got hired, and what was the purpose? Like, what are you trying to make happen down there, I guess?
Yeah, so to lead into that, I'll talk about sort of where the resources for my specific position come from, because it preempts sort of my answer, which is in Hendersonville, we have what are known as municipal service districts. You'll hear those in other communities. That sometimes they're called BIDs, business improvement districts. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's an additional tax that's levied on property in a specific area to provide services above and beyond those that are offered elsewhere in the city.
And the name for those are BIDs or municipal?
MSDs, municipal service districts. Okay. And the state legislature in North Carolina enabled cities to put these in place back in late 70s sometime, 75, 76, something like that. The original legislation was written. And it was written as a tool, to offer a tool to cities to combat urban deterioration, or downtown districts that were struggling. Mm-hmm. And so the easiest way to describe, well, what does that mean? Well, if the city picks up trash once a week throughout the city, mm-hmm. but downtown needs trash pickup 3 times a week, the city can pick up do the 2 additional tax pick or trash pickups days, on the MSD tax. So that's considered that service that's above and beyond. Mm-hmm. And so those taxes that the district specifically pays for can pay for that. And in Hendersonville, they originally put the MSD in place on Main Street to do the original serpentine. So if you've been to Hendersonville, you know about our meandering Main Street. And and that was done back in 1978 with the original MSD tax dollars. Gotcha. And those taxes remained in place to then provide services to the district over time. And so that's how we, pay for our hanging baskets and do our Christmas decorations and, take care of our planters throughout the district and do any extra cleaning or trash pickup or whatever else it might be in the district. And we have 2 MSD districts. We have one for our Main Street region, which is 7th Avenue to Allen. It's 8 blocks of the primary core of Main Street. And then we have the 7th Avenue district, which has been really kind of burgeoning lately, and that's around our depot. Historically, it hasn't been as successful as the Main Street district over the past 20 or so years. Prior to that, it was the heart of the community. Passenger rail stopped in like 1964, and so between then and now, that community's gone through a lot of changes. But so that's our other MSD. And so my charge really is to work with property owners and business owners in those districts to promote their success, right? At the end of the day, it's to create a vibrant business community, to address the issues that come up in those kinds of communities. This year we are building public restrooms in the Main Street district. That's been a push of downtown property owners and stakeholders for a number of years to add that resource so that individual retailers could have some place to point somebody. Rather than.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's very exciting. We're thrilled to be doing it and to be able to be at a point where we can do it. We're using kind of a variety of resources to get there, but the MSD, along with help from our Tourism Development Authority, the Visitor Center, is paying for the construction and the building that we purchased to do it. And then the MSD will provide the resources to maintain the facility once we complete it. And we hope to have those open and available in October. So that's kind of that example of, all right, well, instead of the general city taxpayers paying for a bathroom downtown, it's actually the district itself that's saying, hey, we need this. This is, the city's not building public bathrooms all over town. This is a resource that we need in the district, and that's how we get to it. And so my salary comes from that. We do also get a distribution of sales tax dollars for the overall budget that we have. But we do a lot of different things, and that's kind of an overview. A couple of the other things that I'll mention, and I get my little plug in here for your regular listeners. We do the Rhythm and Brews concert series, which is very similar to Downtown After 5.
And so we'll spend some time on that.
Yeah. It was started, I guess we're in six years or so. Not quite that. 2013 was the first season we had it. And we actually do it the third Thursday. So it typically is the Thursday night before Downtown After 5. Okay. So Downtown After 5 happens on Friday. But we picked Thursday because we wanted it specifically to be for folks who lived in Hendersonville. Yeah. It was kind of a way to say, this is not for tourists.
Make it local, yeah.
Yeah, it's for you guys. We kicked it off actually in partnership with Sierra Nevada when they located their brewery. We recognized obviously an opportunity there, but it's just a live music concert, free concert downtown. Next week is our next show, June 20th, and we've got some great regional acts for that.
Our show today will be dropped sometime in July. So
okay.
What's the July date?
There we go.
Yeah, so let's plug the right date.
Yeah. So the July date is July 18th.
July 18th.
But we run it through the end of September. So third Thursday, May through September, and it's just a fun event. But that's another example. We recognized that we had a changing demographic. We had younger people. We had beach music and classic rock covered with events in downtown, and we wanted to kind of add to that complexity. And we don't claim responsibility for all the spin-off that's happened, but since starting Rhythm and Brews, we've really seen the music scene in downtown, both through the addition of new breweries and other venues, kind of grow. And I think those are the kinds of things, though, that as an organization, that it's a unique kind of economic development / community development,
that ties in well.
Yeah, that really tie together.
That's great. I'm sure that's easy to find online for anybody who's interested in more information.
Yeah, if you do Rhythm and Brews Hendersonville, you'll probably find us. But our webpage is Downtown Hendersonville, so we're easy to find.
Okay.
And we're on Facebook too. So
awesome. So I want to give you the idea to talk about the opportunity to talk about exciting projects that you might have or anything like that. I have two quick questions though, so I want to kind of just give context. Like quick questions, can knock the answers out super fast as needed. But question number one is, do you find that there's any tension between the owners of the real estate in Hendersonville downtown and the people who are leasing it, or do you find that the storefronts have comparable goals to the building owners, if that makes sense? And who do you talk to more often typically?
So we really work to engage property owners and business owners, because I think it's so important that you work to establish what the challenges that each face are. So building owners have a set of boxes that they're trying to check. And I'm concerned about those because one of the things that we really want to see at the end of the day is reinvestment in the buildings. I don't want buildings to deteriorate.
Dilapidated buildings, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so they've got real needs as it relates to how do you fix the roof? How do you make sure that you're continuing to upfit the buildings? And sometimes that's being done by tenants and business owners. There's no doubt about that. But kind of understanding where they are and what those issues are, and then looking at the businesses and talking with them about, well, what's the marketplace like, and what are some of the weaknesses in the marketplace, and what are some of the issues that concern you, and are there things that from a business or from a building owner's perspective, you can, share that would improve your situation. So, it's trying to get a sense really of what those two needs are, and it's true, they don't always align perfectly. I mean, that there is going to be tension between those two, I think.
Naturally.
Yeah, but in terms of what we have in Hendersonville, I think we've worked hard to kind of establish, incentives is one way of putting it. Incentives that help businesses when they're first getting started. Talking to business owners about unique ways that they can do leases. I mean, we don't really have a lot of authority on any of that, but we
Definitely
can say
have influence, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, and it's mostly it's information sharing, right? So hey, this is one way that. Building owners can write a lease. You can write it so that there's not a lot of lease cost for the first 6 months that they're open, or if they do some upfits, you can take the edge off of that. And so just working with people from that perspective and being able to offer information, and also really not having a specific role or skin in the game per se, I think sometimes allows us to be effective in that way.
Makes sense. You're basically, look, we're advocating for both of you all. Like, let's try to. So you end up playing like a mediation role sometimes, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't
quite play out, but.
Yeah, it doesn't quite play out that way typically. Like, I'm never in a room with a building owner or a property.
Trying to balance both needs and be like, okay, let's both get to the same
I think it's at a
destination
larger level, saying when it comes to, how do we use the MSD resources? Right. If I'm hearing from retailers, hey, February and March are tough. Yeah. How do we make January, February, March better? And we're saying, hey, we're going to plug some of these taxes into these things that we're going to work on during January, February, and March. And the property owner saying, well, hey, let's make July better. Well, this is the feedback we're getting from the businesses. If we can take some of the pain off of January, February, and March, it makes it a lot easier for them to pay the rent those months, and that's good for you too. Yeah, right.
Fair enough.
So yeah, and then we just track statistics too. So a big thing that a lot of communities in downtowns, if there's not somebody who's paying attention, what is the average rent rate? Well, I don't know. I mean, so just being able to say, well, based on these 15 properties that we've gotten credible information about over the past year, the average rent rate appears to be X, and so being able to provide some of that kind of information, and then, helping when conversations get started about, well, why is nothing going on in there? Well, these are some of the reasons why that one's been challenging, or, kind of just, I think so many things, particularly in smaller urban downtown areas, it's about just providing good information.
Yeah, and just being available to have the conversations, I'm sure. Yeah. That's probably a lot of it.
Now, we're all human, right, though? So there's definitely
I think most of us are, right? No, that's perfect. And again, so I'm just curious about the hotel.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be there's a lot of hotels here, and there's a lot of feelings and emotions about hotels here in Asheville, so it'd be interesting to hear why Hendersonville is making a push for it. And again, like super quick, we don't have to go super down that rabbit hole, but
no, it's a great question, and it's one that's generated a lot of conversation in Hendersonville too. I always start with Hendersonville used to have a lot of hotels downtown, and now we don't have any. We do have a number of guest
Airbnb.
We do have Airbnb, but we have
bed and breakfasts,
B&Bs and even kind of larger B&Bs like 20-room kind of inns that have historically been inns and continue to operate that way. But we don't have sort of the conference facility / hotel space that certainly Asheville has, and that a lot of communities with the kind of visitor presence that we have found to be really effective. So when I think about a hotel and a conference space downtown, in my mind, downtown economic development guy, I'm actually thinking about that. January, February, and March, we can have the Western North Carolina CPA conference come into town, and they're there from Tuesday through Thursday, and all of a sudden all of my restaurants downtown have lunch business that's 15% more than what they would have had any other week. And so for us, it's adding a resource that currently doesn't exist to the mix. So we've got hotels. We've actually had some new hotel construction over the past 3 to 4 years. It's all been interstate related, exit oriented. So Upward Road exit, which is the southernmost Hendersonville exit on 26 and 64 exit, and then certainly, that area that's kind of northern Henderson County, southern Asheville, all mixed together around the airport. We've seen hotel development there too. So it's a little different in the sense that, with Asheville, y'all have had the downtown hotels, and it's like, at what point is
enough?
Yeah, and at what point do they cannibalize each other, right? Is there a point that
I think we'll
that
find
happens?
out.
So for us, though, I think, and again, I'm speaking from that downtown development perspective.
Right.
That hotel has the potential to bring that value. The questions that are going on in the community is, how do you fit it in? Mm-hmm. How do you fit it into the unique character that's downtown? And we always have the parking conversation. So we're constantly having, what are we going to do to accommodate the parking?
Cars
for that?
Take up space.
Cars take up space, right. So, in development in general, there's always that first mover, that first person who makes an investment in a particular kind of investment, and banks don't like to go along with that person. They like
somebody's got to go have the proof of concept first, right?
Exactly. And there's not an easy way to do that. And I think that's where you asked, why is the city involved? And that's part of that. It's to help facilitate that proof of concept, to help facilitate that it does bring value. We've certainly heard the question, well, once you get one, what happens after that? And
they'll come.
Do you want 5 more? And probably not. So it's obviously a balancing act, but we're in a different location, a different point in our development.
Sure. What are you working on right now that you're excited about? I know I feel terrible, I have to admit, here on public record. I totally forget what the old building that's getting worked on downtown.
That's all right.
It's old something. I was even reading. I was like, I got to remember to ask about this specifically. And here I am.
I'm excited enough about it to have no problem bringing it up myself.
Bring it up. Yes. What's going on?
So we've been we have a mill. It's called the Gray Hosiery Mill in downtown Hendersonville. The city has actually owned the building since the early 90s. So we've had it for quite a while. It's been any number of things over the years, most recently basically our public works facility, but it's been vacant for a solid probably close to a decade, and it had been deteriorating during that time frame. It's the only mill we have. A lot of North Carolina communities have multiple mills, but the original section was 1915, and then an addition in 1918, and then subsequent additions as we get into the 40s and the 60s. But we've been working for basically about 2 years to identify through an RFP process a developer that could help us redevelop the property. And
do you mind explaining that acronym? The RFP?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah. RFP is a request for proposals. It's something that it's a tool that the state legislature gives cities that it's a way for us to say, hey, we've got this building. We want to redevelop it. We're willing to sell it. We're willing to do some things to make it happen.
Bring us some ideas.
Yeah, bring us some ideas.
So you started that process 2 years ago then.
Yeah, and worked hard through that process. We actually were able, through support from the state, to get some community development block grant funds, CDBG funds, that are facilitating the rehab along with the developer pursuing historic tax credits. It's going to be 35 apartments. They started work on the building in April or so. I actually just toured it this morning. It's looking great. And
are these going to be like for rent or for sale?
For rent.
Okay.
And 20% of them, which equates to about 7 apartments, will be for 80% of AMI and under. So they'll be income verified. And then
AMI, just average median income, just to
exactly, another acronym.
They
keep
get
me
easy
straight.
To just throw around.
They do,
they?
they do, and it's dangerous to do that. Yeah, area median income, which in Henderson County is around 40 something for a family of 4, I think, and then the remaining units, the other whatever 35 minus 7 is 28 apartments, will be workforce targeted. So basically 80 to 120% of AMI, and in terms of the rent rates. So we're excited about that project on multiple levels. One, obviously, because it's bringing more affordable housing to our downtown area. It is renovating a great old building that we have in downtown, and one of the few mills that we have. The older sections, the 1915 and 1918 sections, have central clear story windows that are built above the roof, that bring light into the center of the space, and then just these giant windows along the outside edges of the apartments. And so it's going to be a really neat space, big heart of pine beams and posts that were used to construct it. Yeah, it's got a lot of character, and it's exciting to see a project like that move forward, because a lot of folks felt like we were nuts to be pursuing anything with that building, and there were times during the effort that we put into getting it redeveloped that I
questioned the sanity of the decision.
Said maybe they're right, but fortunately we stuck with it, and that was absolutely a community effort.
So did you all end up selling it to the developer?
We did.
And do they get? So are these like rent restrictions written into the deed? Are those things you can share? Just things like that are always curious to
exactly.
people in our seat, of course.
Yeah. So part of our agreement, we used what's called a development agreement to define the overall relationship between the city and the developer. And the developer actually has some of the resources that developers using on the project are loans from the city. And so as a part of the deed, there's part of it is deed restrictions, part of it is the terms of the loan. Right. That if they don't maintain the affordability, that the loan becomes due, balloon payment all of a sudden, that kind of thing. So that was sort of how that all plugs in together. And it was a combination of the sale, and once they're hoping to actually be leasing, having folks move in January of 2020.
Wow.
So they're moving quick, yeah. And part of that is related to delivering the tax credits to the tax credit investors. So anyhow, that is a very exciting project. We're certainly excited about how it continues to move forward. It was because of the tax credits, the CDBG funds, the city's role, it's a pretty complex project.
Yeah, there's
a lot of partners, a lot of moving pieces. Partway through our negotiation, there was the scare at the federal level that they were going to eliminate the historic tax credits, and so our developer, kind of moved more quickly through certain parts of the project than others to make sure that those tax credits were preserved for the project, even if they changed at the federal level. So, it was certainly a learning experience. Anytime you do a project that complex and that unique, you learn a lot about how all those things work. when you get to this stage, it feels like, yeah, we were making the right decisions when you're starting to see that building come back to life.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting one. That one goes, certainly city council, sat through some difficult closed sessions to figure out how to make that project work and, made some difficult decisions to do that. And but I think the impact of the apartments, the new residents downtown are going to be really, really positive for us. And there's property in the area of that mill that we think has the potential.
A ripple effect, right?
It does, right. That we'll see some additional reinvestment. We're hopeful that we'll also see some additional housing. So,
no doubt.
That's good stuff. And the other thing I'd mention just real quick is that we are working early on a streetscape for our 7th Avenue district. So
where is the 7th Avenue district?
So 7th,
mentally place it on.
Yeah, so if you're looking at a map of Hendersonville, Main Street runs north to south, off to the northeastern corner, basically on almost a 45. Off the northern section of Maine is 7th, and it's another smaller commercial district. It's a National Register district too, so it's its own historic district based around the depot, primarily the historic depot. But it's a little bit of our brewery district / whatever you want to call it, right? When I first moved to Hendersonville, there was one brewery that had just opened. We've now got 5 right in the downtown area, and 3 of them are in the 7th Avenue district, and there's a 4th one that
it's making moves.
Yeah, making moves. They put a sign up, right? I'm still not sure exactly how far along in their development they are, but yeah. So
very cool.
Good stuff.
Yeah, no, Lew, thanks so much for joining us, all the insights and everything. Anything else, though? Like, we don't get anybody from Hendersonville up here very often, so take advantage.
Well, it's just fun to come up and talk with you all and kind of, I think, talk about the differences and similarities that are happening in between the two communities. Certainly, I always talk about how what's happening in Asheville is like a big giant rock. You mentioned the ripples earlier, getting dropped in the pond, and we've got to be aware of that, and there's opportunity there, obviously. So I hope you guys continue to figure it out, and we do too. So it's nice, though, to certainly connect and have the conversation.
No, absolutely. Well, we'll all find out together, no doubt. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode. We really appreciate your attention, your time. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you enjoy the show in general, it really would mean a lot to us if you'd hop on over to wherever you listen to podcasts. Give us a rating, drop us a review, let us know how we're doing. And if you haven't already, come out to our meetup. Just as a reminder, it is the first Wednesday of every month over at Archetype Brewery in West Asheville, there on Haywood Road. So see you all next week, and hopefully see you guys at a meetup soon. Take care.